Life doesn't always give you much reason to smile. Sometimes you'll laugh, sometimes you'll cry. We don't always know the wins or whys. You gotta keep on moving, 'cause tomorrow's not promised. So keep a smile on your face, 'cause in the end it'll be okay. No matter what you're going through, don't let anyone take that from you. Have a little hope, have a little faith. It gets real hard, trust me, I know. But keep a positive mindset. Don't let the negative bring you down. Trust and believe in your strength, and certainly never lose your smile. Keep a smile on your face, 'cause in the end it'll be okay. No matter what you're going through, don't let anyone take that from you.
Genocide. 150 years that our people cry. 150 years try and kill our pride. 150 years that our people die. 1876 Indian Act, changing the ways that the Indians act. Eliminate, eradicate all the Indian packs. Take the land and create an Indian tax. Assimilate, never bringing Indians back. Murder and rape, generations of them. 1763 proclamation began. Now we celebrate, do it over again. Neglecting to help all the needy, taking the land cause they're greedy. They broken the treaties, brainwashing you all through a TV. Dividing us all cause they're sneaky. I need them to free me. 150 years, no celebration. And you with me, T, in our First Nation. We need to show love through education. The future is here, reconciliation. 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 Reconciliation.
We need to reconcile today. day. Cause Canada affiliates with all the history of the states. All the misery that fills me with hate, it kills me today. Same way it killed the ancestors back in the day. It's every generation know the drama. But where we gon' win is the knowing that will haunt you. It will taunt you, right chin wrong you. This is what karma puts upon you. What happened is not gone, it's still going on. Just hitting on you, been a long one, but we on going, spitting on you. Watch the scale tipping on you. We have been carrying that weight for too long, bro. We don't want your sympathy, we want your empathy. Cause your apathy's getting to me. Ignorance is unsettling to me. That's why I don't mind that you stepping to me. We're not letting it be, we are setting it free. So we don't carry it heavily. Our history is not separately, it's binary. 150 years later, the shit is happening finally.
that Abdirahman shared, our community lost part of its sanity. You stole our peace and now you desire to take our humanity. These are the streets and your presence adds to the confusion. It's suffocating, no longer our sanctuary to breathe deeply. Our reality is slowly becoming a delusion. Have you forgotten that we own them? Down to the very fabric of our core, it is tattooed in the DNA of the poor, felt in our music, food, clothing, color, language, culture. We call these streets life, you call it death, labeled in your threats. We call it opportunity to create legacy. You see it as misery, we see it as our monument to victory. This situation is getting heavy, cause Somali lives matter, not just to Tommy, Susan and Becky. There is no turning back time. Now all we have is hindsight. This state-sponsored violence is a crime we must fight. There is no turning back time. Now all we have is hindsight. State-sponsored violence is a crime we must fight, cause the streets is the last line of safety for our families. And if we can't protect our loved ones from police brutality, then we shall see the streets speak stories that won't be kind to history. So take back your 150 and give it is back our block. This is surely not a place you've been invited. Y'all been warned. We won't accept another body in the valley. We got y'all on watch in these streets. We gon' keep these streets on lock.
Ready, set, love. 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 Ready, set, love.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, folks who stayed with us. Thank you, everyone who's tuning in. Before I move into the next moderator, who's Morissa, I would like to just touch on a couple of points that have been raised by folks before us. I think that CPEP doesn't claim that we have the solution for anything. We don't claim that. That's why we are bringing community members together in order to start these conversations together and move forward going on. The multiplicity of identities and of people that are, that make up or build up these communities that we are trying to reach out to should be shown in the multiplicity of quote unquote solutions or alternatives that we are, going to organize together, that we're going to support each other in organizing. I want to just give a shout out to our comrades from the Toronto Prisoners' Rights Project. CPEP existed since 2012, has been fighting against incarceration, carceral expansion on Algonquin territory for a little while, and police expansion. And we have been joined by the Toronto Prisoners' Rights Project for several months now. Since we started organizing together, we have made several organizing successes. So far, the Prisoner Emergency Support Fund, for example, raised $100,000 that we are distributing to folks who are incarcerated currently and who are released and their families. We don't claim that this is a solution neither. The solution is to abolish the prisons, is to abolish the police. We're coming for you. However, we're not coming for you for revenge. You're lucky. We're not coming for you for revenge. We're coming for you because state-sanctioned violence has to stop. And I'm gonna stop there. And I'm going to introduce the second speaker from inside, made a recording, Shane Maurice Chartrand, who's an incarcerated comrade who will speak for himself through this short recording. Please listen in.
Hey, Shane, go ahead. You can tell us about yourself and then tell us about those alternatives to policing that you're talking about.
All right, I'm Shane Chartrand, 33 years old from Winnipeg, Manitoba. My reserve is north of Winnipeg. But my thoughts on other things other than policing, like for example, instead of calling the police when somebody's having a mental health issue, why can't a mental health worker come and try and de-escalate the situation instead of calling the cops right away where they're ready to pull out guns and they're not trained for that kind of situation, and then people get hurt, like the woman in Toronto that fell 28 stories with 4 policemen around her, and that was a call for a cry for mental health. We still don't know what happened with that lady, but that's what I have to say about this.
And her name is Regis Korchinski-Paquette. Yes, thank you for bringing that up, brother. The other question I had for you, because you identify as First Nations?
Yes.
Yeah, and I just want to say, like, for example, the services like MH and stuff like that you're talking about, like, would you prefer those workers or those people who would intervene when there's situations of crisis to be from the same communities that you're from or outside of those communities?
Preferably from the community where I am from, or really it doesn't matter as long as a change does happen from policing to other alternatives.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And I just want to touch base with you, like, about, like, touch on maybe like what are the harms, that experience from policing, very briefly, like if you can tell, like, what kind of harms you experience or other folks experience from policing.
I've experienced very negative harms from the police. I have nothing good to say about them at all. Even while I'm in custody, there's a lot that I do want to say that there's not enough time to. Where I'm from, when the police come to a call, they come guns out, and they're intimidating you, they're scaring you, and then when you get scared, you act in a way where, like, you want to run away because they're scaring you and you haven't done anything wrong. And that's where I think CMH workers should be called in to de-escalate in a situation like that.
Thank you for your input.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to just leave the floor to Morissa, and Morissa from the AIDS Committee of Ottawa. Thank you very much for moderating the panel.
Thank you, Souheil. Firstly, I wanted to greet everyone here. Thank you very much for offering your time. Also, thank you very much to the people who are in attendance. It's your attendance that makes things like this very important, as this is for and by the community. Also, very much thank you for allowing us to hear the voices from the people inside. I think it's very important that we center people who have directly been impacted by the police and by violence at the hands of the state, although the state in itself is violent. So what I'm going to do first, I'm just going to introduce our panelists. I feel like everyone is going to be on the screen, so I guess when I say your names, just like wave, say hi. Also, if you can share your pronouns after I say your name and like what you do based on the information that was given to me. Yeah, so first we have Mumina and Lily, who work with the Herongate Tenant Coalition and Collective Justice Center. How are the both of you today?
Hello. Good. Not be on camera, so.
It's okay, we all are. Do you mind sharing your pronouns just so people in the comments, as well as people, if we're going to be referring to you, know how to address?
Yeah, she, her.
And she, her as well for myself.
Perfect, thank you very much. Next, we have Leah Bell, who works with the Overdose Prevention Ottawa and Power. Leah?
Hi, everybody. Yeah, so I am a core organizer with Overdose Prevention Ottawa. We were involved with the setting up of the unsanctioned sites that led to all of the supervised consumption sites. I'm also the chair of Power, which is the Prostitutes of Ottawa Gatineau Work, Educate, Resist. I think I've been listening to most of the conversation, and something that's been missing from the conversation that I've heard is the drug using population and sex workers from this conversation. So I'd like to just add a little bit of that to this conversation from my perspective. So I've been a drug user for over a decade. I've been a sex worker too for probably about 10 years too. So I was given some questions that I would like to answer. The first one, how do you define safety?
Leah?
Safe communities? Yes.
Hi, sorry. So I was just going to introduce everyone first before we get into the questions. I just had wanted you to share your pronouns, sorry.
Oh, sorry. Hey, my pronouns are she and her.
Perfect, thank you so much. And we'll definitely get into the questions as well. So sorry to interrupt.
Oh, that's cool.
Perfect, thank you. Next we have Jackie, who works with Anakbayan Canada. Jackie, are you here?
Hi, so I use the pronouns she and her.
Thank you so much. Next we have Sakinna. Sakinna is a Black person that does a lot of community building and organizing in the city. Sakinna, hi, how are you? Do you mind sharing your pronouns for folks?
Hey, you can use they, them.
Perfect, thank you very much. And finally, we have Marcelo, who works with FFF, Extinction Rebellion, Sandy Hill Housing Co-op, Egal and Condor Collective, as well as Artists with No Borders. Finally, OPIRG. Marcelo, how are you? Do you mind sharing your pronouns, please?
Hello, my friends. My pronouns are he, his, and we, because I imply my ancestors as well as my coming generations. Thanks.
Perfect, thank you so much. So the first, because I'm aware that we have like a bit more people and we've already like gone over time just because the conversations have been so rich and so diverse. The first question that I wanted to ask folks, just because I think it ties well with what a lot of people have been speaking about, as well as what Shane was talking about in his témoignage, like in his story, is essentially what does a world without police mean to you, and how does police or make you feel, render you unsafe, and if not police, what does make you feel unsafe? So I'm going to start with Leah because Leah was like the first one on the ball. So Leah, if you wanted to start with your answer with that question, that would be wonderful. Leah, are you here? You're muted.
Sorry, yeah, I'm calling in. So what makes me feel unsafe? So anything that's medicalized or clinical. So anything that results in me being cut off of my medication that my doctor prescribes me. Because sometimes I use it in other ways than how it's being prescribed. So in like the supervised consumption site, it's an anonymous service. So if I want to say snort my Adderall, I can do it without worry that my doctor would ever find out because of confidentiality. And that's one of the most important aspects of the space. And because there's a toxic drug supply right now, that makes me feel unsafe. So basically, if we can contribute and find ways to allocate money into services like supervised consumption sites, that would make me feel feel safe. Also, criminalized sex work, it makes me feel unsafe. We have little to no time to access, to assess a situation before we take a date with a John, if we're street sex workers, and also with like with the toxic drug supply again, the borders have been closed for months, and there's even like we don't know what's in our supply. So it's really important that people have access to supervised consumption sites so we can use safely. So we need sites that are open 24 hours a day. And there's hardly any beds available in rehab. And thankfully, many people have been released from incarceration, and the demand for drugs is still there. But the supply it's hard. A good supply is hard to find, and what's out there, it changes constantly, and it's killing thousands of people. And yeah, due to the limited hours in the supervised consumption sites, during an opiate epidemic, it scares me, and it makes me feel unsafe that my friends, they're dying every day.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Jackie, do you want to go next?
Sure. Yeah, so I guess there are a few questions in there, but I think what I will kind of focus on is looking at rebuilding and working towards systems that keep people out of, basically ending poverty in the ways that capitalism functions to keep people in poverty. So looking at structures that would house people, looking at structures that would make sure that the material needs and goods of everyone are being met, making sure that people have wages and access to social services and systems that don't leave anyone behind, essentially. And in particular, people without status. So a lot of the work in Anakbayan that we do is with diaspora communities, and then also thinking back to the homeland in the Philippines. But in the diaspora context, a lot of temporary foreign workers and especially during this pandemic have been facing, or it's becoming more and more obvious, and the ways that access to essential systems and social services are really affecting communities without status, and making sure that those types of voices and those types of people who are often the most excluded from recreating and building those communities are at the forefront. So I just wanted to highlight the aspect of making sure that issues of citizenship and issues of access when it comes to status are addressed. So I think really looking at like what keeps people in that system of continuous poverty, and really centering capitalism and how that bleeds into a lot of the ways that we think in social services as well. So one of the roles that I play is as a social worker, and understanding how those systems as well have a role in looking at our own complicity and our own ways of not often being band-aid solutions, or not really addressing the root causes that keep a lot of people living in poverty, and a lot of people without access to those systems. So trying to look beyond those band-aid solutions, and looking at really ending those structures. And then more on like a level of who I work with on a day-to-day basis, being a lot of Filipino youth and Filipinos in the diaspora community who are engaging in grassroots movements. So how we work in Anakbayan is really about organizing ourselves and getting people engaged in movement building, essentially, and looking at it intergenerationally, long ass word, and making sure that that we're really building trust among those communities that often can be silenced by a lot of the structures we're a part of. So making sure the youth are connected to us and connected to the different generations that hold a lot of lessons about activism, lessons about movement building, and lessons about grassroots movements.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Next, I'm going to move it to Mumina. So if you can share like what a world without police means to you and how they might make you feel unsafe, or what else makes you feel unsafe.
Sorry, can you guys hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Just wanted to make sure. So yeah, I would just kind of going off of what everybody else said, I would just say like I envision rather a world of community-based systems of intervention as opposed to state-based systems of intervention. So just allowing the community to be the ones to intervene on a macro and micro level. Similar to like things that I've seen, like just growing up in a working class racialized neighborhood that's heavily been surveilled by the Ottawa police. I see efforts on a micro level made to intervene in conflicts by community members. And I feel like that has been just like on a micro level again, has been effective. And so seeing that streamlined into like a system, I think could be more effective. And just on a personal level, answering the question of how police have made me feel unsafe and rendered me unsafe, I think, yeah, growing up in a neighborhood that's highly surveilled by the Ottawa police and on a consistent basis, seeing that presence definitely is traumatizing and has made me feel largely unsafe, being that oftentimes when approached, it's never in a proactive community way, I guess, so to speak. And it's on a confrontational, defensive way. And so it's just rendered me to feel unsafe in a space that is mine. And so, yeah, just to kind of sum up my long-winded answer, it would definitely be seeing a world that we live in that has community-based systems of intervention by the people living in communities.
Perfect, thank you. So so I think that the common themes that like what a lot of you are speaking of is the fact that there are like within marginalized communities. So whether it be like sex workers, people who are waiting for status, like permanent residents, refugees, migrants, like everyone in precarious working situations, it's very hard to like have a trust for the police when like the police is inherently violent or inherently works to like domineer and oppress them, right? And I think that the intersections and the intricacies of people's identities and just their experiences are very important, especially when we're talking about harm reduction, when we're talking about like the opioid epidemic and how like that's affected within the lens of a pandemic as well. So what I'm going to ask of like Lily, Sakinna, and Marcelo is like just based on what everyone else has mentioned, like how can we center racial, economic, gender, sexual disability, environmental, and other forms of social justice alongside the principles of universal access and intersectionality in like a world without police and in like a safe world. So Sakinna, I didn't know if you wanted to start.
Sure, yeah. I think how we end up centering all of these things is by acknowledging that the police system is only a branch of a larger effort. Because like going off the conversation of like, what does a world without police mean to you, or what does that look like? It means if we're advocating for abolishing police and if we're saying defund the police, we all need to be able to look at the fact that the police don't exist in a vacuum. They perform a service for the government, which they do rather successfully, and which is to commit murder and commit violence against Black and Brown people. And that goes beyond murder, that goes into fear and terror tactics, that leads to school to prison pipeline, that leads to criminalization, that leads to like delegitimizing gender-based violence, citizenship and border services, the ability to dictate what is and is not a crime based on whatever the popular opinion or like the hegemonic opinion, the opinion that the majority of people in power have at the time, and also perpetuating the narrative that justice can only be served through these systems, which as we can see is clearly not true. The police service and the police system has been woven into every basically every facet of life. And it means that when we're having discussions about how to center these folks and how to make sure that the most marginalized are not at the end of whatever we decide that we want to do, it means that when we're discussing community alternatives, we're not just looking at how to do police better or what is specifically an alternative to police, but how to do community better, because at the end of the day, the police, they do what they're supposed to do. It just doesn't happen to be caring about our lives. And what makes us care about our lives and what holds a community accountable is building better community and building a stronger community, which means making the parameters for accountable community, which means making the parameters for transparent community, which means making sure that the people who are in community are able to hold the people who need the support and that those people are being kept safe. That's.
Thank you. Marcelo? You are muted.
Okay, thank you. Kung hamastanza, imainaya, kwe wichkiwen. Hello, beautiful people, sisters and brothers. Bonjour, le bel monde. I want to start my intervention by following Anishinaabe protocol. I must acknowledge we are on unceded and unsurrendered Algonquin land, and I must say that each one of us is a person, not a colonized individual. We belong to our communities, where I must include our ancestors and our future generations. And I will say this in a Lakota language by expressing this interconnectedness and saying Mitakuye Oyasi, which is also a salutation of joy and victory. And it means I am the reflection of everything else to the cosmic level, not just down to the planet level, but to the entire cosmos. Although this happens on space, on a territory, when being, we reflect this cosmically as well. A family of gatherings being, so we can together dismantle the monopoly of violence that is exerted on all of us, on all living systems as well on this planet, on behalf of the patriarchal state in Mississippi, which is the name of this region in the Algonquin language. One of the doctrines of the colonial state is being using since its appearance on the land is that of security or safety. You know, we know well that the colonial state boasts that to follow the doctrine of national security, implemented as well in the food security sector, and they claim to have food security. Well, in the indigenous world, we don't agree with these notions, and we have different nomenclature to name these things. We have harmony and equilibrium, which are very important to be indigenous nations. Security is equated to the control of recognized hazards in order to achieve an acceptable level of risk. It is recognized that there are internal and external issues to have any safe circumstance. And since the state also boasts to have the monopoly of brute force, it uses it to our detriment and against other living entities and systems. Security or safety is a normative concept. It complies with situation-specific definitions of what is expected and acceptable by mainstream society as things go nowadays. Those of us that inhabit the fringes of the 1% are thought to be risk to the normality of mainstream society because they pretend to maintain the status quo, so normality can be protected, promoted, and actively implemented. Steadiness refers to the steadiness of the state, to the status quo, so the individual can have well-being. but the individual is an illusion that the Europeans brought to these lands. In our languages, we don't have not even a word for individual. We are persons because the persons have the communities on their shoulders. The communities is our responsibilities. In the Western world, the individual has also been projected outside the human sphere, and nowadays even private corporations are deemed to be individuals, you know, so they can have rights. And rights are also an illusion that was imposed on everything. And nowadays we use the notion of rights at all times. In our indigenous mature cultures, we rather use responsibilities, you know. So during this pandemic, we have transitioned from the world of rights, which is an illusion, to the realm of responsibilities. We had to be responsible to our families, and that's why we, you know, we have to like undress, we have to be washing our hands, wear like a mask and all the things that you are aware of, you know. So in order to deal with the questions I was posed, I had to restore to my ancestors' wisdom, you know, and I propose something that has been proposed already to the General Assembly in the United Nations, the notion of sumakamanya, in my language, Aymara, which means live and coexist well. In the Algonquin language, they also have the same perception, and they say mino bimadisiwin, which means being alive well. So at the core, you find the same thing expressed in different languages and with different symbologies, but the core is basically the same. I could cite all the other sayings in other indigenous languages, but I know that I just have 8 minutes, so I'll try to maximize my time. So suma kamanya means that you are in a safe place. You know, it will be too long to explain the whys and the granularity of this thing, but I propose that we have a series of workshops where we can share the wisdom of mature cultures or cultures that have attained full maturity, which are Anishinaabe culture, the Haudenosaunee culture, the Aymara culture, the Inca culture, the Maya culture, and so on. We have been keeping this wisdom for thousands of years. My nation is about 20,000 years old. It's a very, very old nation, you know. So our grandmothers, they know better. And we propose that the grandmothers, our grandmothers, should be the ones that actually oversee the social behavior of the new social order, because our grandmothers, they know best. We are like about 500 million persons in the ethnosphere, that is in indigenous nations, but we are being brought to extinction, especially in the Amazon. For us, it is quite key and crucial to live in equilibrium with Pachamama, Mother Earth, and with the cosmos, Father Cosmos. We call that Tajpacha. I haven't really found a proper translation, but it's more or less like the cosmos.
I'm just going to interrupt you just because it's been over 8 minutes, and I just want Lily to be able to answer the question, but I'll definitely come back so you can finish your point.
Yeah, well, I prepared myself for 8 minutes, but I think it's not going to be enough. So I guess I would finish it with this last point, but I have much more to share.
Okay, thank you.
Our pilgrimage of suffering and tears began in 1492 when the Europeans came to our lands and they tried to get rid of us. You know, the rate of extinction of our nations on average was 95%. We were here in the Abya Yala, and we need to decolonize our minds, our spirits, and our bodies. we were like about 100 million persons living in the Abya Yala. The Abya Yala is what we know as the Americas, North, Central, and South America. And the rate of extinction here on the back of the turtle was 97.5%, which means that out of 100 people, almost 98 were brought to extinction. They are not living anymore. Our ancestors were killed like that because they tried to destroy us. They couldn't. I am still here, you know. And I propose that we have to go through this process of reddening ourselves as well as blackening ourselves to recuperate our minds, our bodies, our feelings, and our spirits. And I guess I will conclude my intervention with this because I don't have any more time. I have much more to say because I think it's very important that when we are choosing the alternative to policing, we have to go through a process of visioning like we do in our indigenous cultures. We have to go through a process of indigenization, through a process of decolonization, which I am already doing at the university level, and also acknowledging our parity nature. The individual is an illusion. Nothing can stand by itself. We depend and we imply our ancestors and our coming generations. And we need a series of workshops to deploy all of these teachings and offer them to humanity. That's why we have been keeping this sacred and secret. But the time has come to share them with all of humanity, both humans and non-human nations. Because for us, everything is alive, everything has a spirit. And I think I will just finish by saying, Nayarawa Wikagayspita, Waranka Warankanakta Kutanika. Yuspagara mama, yuspagara tata, yuspagara miigwech. Thank you, gracias, merci.
Merci beaucoup, c'est fortement apprécié. Thank you very much. So I'm just going to ask Lily that same question. Essentially, how can we center like people who are living at the intersections of race, class, gender, sex, disability, like gender identity, like with and all the other forms, like alongside the principles of universal access, accessibility within community-led alternatives and initiatives?
I think that particular question everyone has answered pretty well. We have to let people whose lived experiences take the front, be the ones who get paid, be the ones who speak. Those of us who are not part of certain groups need to check our egos, take a step back sometimes, not be so pushy. And it's really important to make sure that you're not pushing people to be on the front lines, but that you're making it possible for them to. That includes like financial compensation, that includes like helping them get around, driving them places, all that stuff. I did want to bring up, I guess, a more, complicated question, because it's been something I've been thinking about in terms of abolition for a few days now. And I do think it ties into that question of how do we center the intersections, because we all know that there's going to be certain people who do have these experiences who we may not necessarily agree with, or who have maybe done harm in our own communities. And that's something that we need to also reconcile with. So the quote that I'm referring to is by Miriam Kabi. It's you cannot hold people accountable. You have to allow people to enter into accountability and take it for themselves, because holding someone accountable is coercive. And what we're trying to do as prison abolitionists is to make things uncoercive. And the point, I think, is that currently as a space, we do not allow for people to enter into accountability. We do not create spaces where they can enter into restorative justice and then be forgiven, because prison is innately about punishing. It's about, you've done something wrong and now we're going to put you away. And how do we create spaces where someone can enter into accountability and make amends and take them back into our community? And that's something we have to also reconcile with as abolitionists too, because say the jail line helps people inside, they come outside. Some of them might hold some unpleasant views. What do we do to help them then? Like, what if they want to help prison abolition, but they're kind of racist? Like, where do we create the spaces where we can tell them they're wrong, and then they feel the ability to enter into accountability, make amends, and change, instead of currently everyone is so defensive when someone points out that they're wrong that they immediately go, oh, no, because we write people off, we put them in prison, we tell them to go away, never come back, you know, like, for ourselves, we have to create these spaces that are more forgiving.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I think you posed like a really good question. And so what I'm going to do is like, I'm essentially just going to like try and summarize and like take out the key points before I pose like the last question. And I'm going to let everyone know I'm like, you folks are going to have like a minute and a half to answer. So it's going to be very rapid round. So essentially, I think what a lot of, and this is also going off of what other panelists were talking about, I think that there is a need for community. I believe that a lot of people have mentioned the reasons as to why building community, building from within, not building from up, and really being on the ground with everyone is very important. Taking from a lot of people's own experiences, being in the system, having to engage with police, and like noting all of the different extensions of policing and of the state and the violence that a lot of people come into. It's very important to acknowledge and remember that when we're talking about a world without police, correct? Just before, like, and I'm really trying not to like put my own personal opinions, because once again, I'm not a panelist, I'm just the girl asking the questions. I think it's also very important to remember that like a world without police does not mean like everyone is going to be happy and like we're going to function with like everyone hugging and everyone doing like XYZ thing. I think it's very important that we still center like accountability, still focus on the fact that there are going to be disagreements, because there, as said, there are disagreements within communities. There are there's harm that's caused within the same community, and it would be very false to not allow people who have been hurt by like these same community members not to be able to express that hurt or have to be tone policed, because we believe that because there's no police or there's no state, there's less of a use of anger. I just wanted to like lay that there. So the question that I'm going to pose, and Jackie, I'm going to let you know I'm starting with you, is essentially noting what community is and noting how we engage with our communities. What are the next steps? What do we have to consider when we are not only engaging our communities, because we have to remember that we all don't belong to the same community. So you can speak about your own communities, or you can speak about Ottawa as a whole. So what do you have to consider when you are engaging your communities, when you're engaging volunteers and participants, and like trusting organizations, and how can we then engage the public and make this organizing, this community-based organizing sustainable? I really just want like the last question to be very action-based, so that like, you know, there's a go after this. So Jackie.
Yeah, for sure. I guess like in addition to the lovely things that you just said about like trust and engaging with like a broad range of people and organizations, I think that currently in Ottawa, I was also born here and have worked in like various places and have been around a little while, but I think we have a large number of grassroots and different organizations that are already happening and doing amazing work on a day-to-day basis. A few of them, like I would just name like the Sexual Assault Support Center that supports survivors and have used like a collective model and collective lens, different organizations like Migrant that works with Filipino communities who are largely migrant workers and domestic workers, folks working with sex workers. I just think there's a lot of strengths that we have that exist, and I think that we could definitely come together and just have that dialogue that is so needed, and go through and try and build that trust amongst our different roles in the community and the different issues that we're seeing, and try to find those links and those ways that we can basically plan for this type of work to continue, because it's already happening, and it's happening all over, whether we hear about it or not. And then lastly, I would say like it would take a lot of outreach to a lot of communities in Ottawa that have not been folded into some of these conversations that we're having now. So yeah, so that's where I would go from here.
Thank you. Mumina, you are up next.
So yeah, just kind of building off of what Jackie said, it's as simple, I think, as transferring the social and fiscal like power and capital from the like systems like the police and transferring them over, into established grassroots organizations that are already doing the work. And I think it's like short and sweet. It's that simple. And that's my answer, honestly.
Very to the point. Love it. You said what had to be said. Sakinna?
Thank you.
Yep. So next steps, I think for people, it's very relevant to make sure that we're understanding the full scope of what oppression and what the policing system actually involves and how it has affected our day-to-day life. Talked about this earlier, but I really do believe that we don't get justice within the system. And so we need to start looking at this beyond that and look at what exactly we want and how exactly we're willing to get it. I think that making sure that we have capital is very important. I think that making sure that we have the commitment and the understanding of the people in our communities is necessary, because those are the people who are going to lead us wherever they would like to go. I think that a commitment to learning and unlearning our worldviews as people who have experienced these things, because racism and oppression do not come without consequences, and they have affected the way that we do see the world. So it's important to take a look at that. For Black folks, I think all the I recommend everybody read. I think it's important. We say we're trying to provide those are the people who will people should be very that they more if that enables someone. We need those voices, or that we never get to hear in like the drug using and sex work communities. I believe criminalized people need to be at the front and center of this action. I could foresee this being healing, and a lot of wounds could close with this act of restorative justice. And I think that we need a peer-only board of directors, and look to groups like VANDU, which is the Vancouver area network of drug users, for leadership. It should be transparent, and there would be like an annual general meeting whereby people are voted in for one-year terms. That's how Power, like the group that I'm a chair of, that's how we operate. And we also, again, with funding, hopefully we could get more funding provincially and get a commitment. And I understand that it would be a bit of a social experiment, but the ball would be in our court, and we would need to budget and plan and do a bunch of unsexy stuff. But if there's one thing I know about us, we are resilient, and we are strong, and we are an amazing community, and given the proper resources and trainings like mental health first aid and assist, I'm convinced that our quality of life would dramatically improve if we were to abolish the Ottawa police. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcelo. You're muted.
Yeah, thanks. I just want to comment about something I've noticed in this. I have attended several conferences by now, and I see that most of us, we have been indoctrinated, we have been colonized, and within us, there is a colonized individual that exists. And for some reason that I ignore, we refuse to deal with that issue, and we don't want to decolonize ourselves. And I think that's the important and the most crucial task that we have for our lives, that we have to decolonize our minds, we have to decolonize our hearts, and we have to decolonize our spirits. The only people that have remained untouched by colonization is the isolated indigenous tribes of the Amazon, but they are being killed by the president nowadays, Bolsonaro, and they are being killed as well by the transnational corporations. And I also hear many concepts that come right from the settlers' minds, and we just repeat them very happily without ever having a critical mind to deconstruct them and to build something new, ancestral yet new. For instance, the notion of rights, the notions of individuals, the notions of money. Money is going to disappear very soon because cryptocurrency is being taken on by China, by many socialist states that are the ones that have dealt the best with the pandemic, you know. So now in geopolitics, the centers of power have completely shifted. You know, now it's not anymore the United States and Europe. Now it is China, Russia, Venezuela, and Cuba that are already the centers of geostrategic power. Yet we are still talking about capitalism. We are still talking about capital, and we know that what has been oppressing and exploiting us is a layer of different oppressions, injustices, which go in order. The base layer of oppression is patriarchy. And patriarchy is in its last leg of existence because according to our measurements as indigenous peoples, we are in the last leg of the precession of the equinoxes. And patriarchy has been around for about 5,245 or 44 years. It's about that patriarchy fades away. And what's going to follow is going to follow a shift in paradigm. And we have to take it on with all our energy, with all of our heart, because we have to do that. We call that the Rainbow Warriors. And the Rainbow Warriors, they are recognizing each other, and they are going to form clusters of Rainbow Warriors, and they are going to lead us in this new age. And they are going to be led in their turn by our grandmothers, you know, because it's time that things turn around and that it is the woman that actually lead humanity. If I had prepared some slides, but I guess we don't have time for that. And I had a slide of the foundation of Canada and the United States. And the forefathers of these two countries, they're all white rich men. You don't see not even a single woman. And they never asked not even indigenous peoples. There were about 500 indigenous nations when the Europeans came. And nowadays, there are like about 30 nations, you know. Actively, the settlers, they have tried to get rid of the indigenous. I mean, to a certain degree, they were very able to do that. You know, here they have become a minority. In my country, Bolivia, no, we are still like about 84% of the population. We're a majority. And we were able to put one of ours as the president of my country, Evo Morales. You know, and my country is not anymore a republic. We've left behind the republic. We are the multicultural and plurilingual state of Bolivia. And war is forbidden by law in my country. So all those changes happened after we went through a process of decolonization. And I think a series of workshops about decolonizing our minds, indigenizing our thinking is quite necessary, you know, and I think that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marcelo. I think you raised very great points about how decolonizing our minds is essential in noting the colonial nature of the state and essentially police. So last but not least, we have Leah. Do you mind finishing us off, perhaps with a bang, with some heavy points, or with whatever you want to say?
Yeah, Lily, sorry. So I have 3 points, I guess. The first one, I did want to address Marcelo. currently I wouldn't say China is a socialist or even communist state. It's basically a capitalist state with one-party government. Capitalism rules there even more than I think it does here. Second, Morissa, you brought up a very pertinent point that we cannot allow harm to come to members of our community. Police abolition, prison abolition doesn't mean that harms just get ignored. I think we need to find that line where harms are prevented and harms are addressed, but then leave that space where people know that if they come back, if they recognize their harms and they proactively search for transformative justice, that there will be a space of acceptance and not a space of we never want you around. And I think that's the main thing, right? That's what we have to negotiate. That's a line that we need to find as abolitionists for making an abolitionist future reality. And the third point is that yes, capitalism definitely do rule our world right now. And because it does, we all need to eat. Like we all need food, and everyone's burning out because everyone's working 2 jobs and trying to do all these like social justice stuff, right? What all of us organizations, what all of our grassroots organizations need is money without strings. Like not talking about like NGO type funding, like it's acknowledged that the development of NGOs and the spread of NGOs have de-radicalized many movements because it's tied to the state and there's too many strings. We need in order to keep doing this work, we can't depend on NGO funding, but we also can't just starve to death. So I don't know, we can go steal some money, I guess. But without access to money so that we can live, but with no strings so that we are not de-radicalized, you know, like that's what we need for abolitionist future to happen.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Honestly, thank you everyone for all of your points and everything that you all shared. I do know that the time given is nearly not enough time to speak about everything that's important. And this is not like the only space where folks are going to have to really find solutions and build community and like work on the solutions brought forward. CPEP and a lot of other community organizers, some here, some not here, some in the comments, some just watching, do extraordinary work. So myself, I would just like to once again thank everyone for being here. Thank you for your attendance. Thank you for being present. I know that there's so much going on in the world and people could like ultimately just be resting and taking care of themselves, and that also would be so valid. So thank you. Have a great day, everyone. I guess I will leave the floor to Souheil. Is that what's happening?
Thank you, Morissa.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone for the input. And you know, we heard from a lot of community members about a lot of directions that we should take, a lot of solutions that we have to enact in order to fight the carceral, racist, colonial, cis heteropatriarchal state. We have to fight together, and this gathering, you know, stresses like the importance of collective knowledge, and how the fact that when we come together and we have these discussions in a space that is safe for a lot of us. And safe doesn't mean where there's no anger. Safe doesn't mean where there is no emotions. You know, when a space when we come together and think about these things. And I think that you know, this was very touching for me. I thank all the folks who don't have the camera on their face right now, like I do. because there's a lot of folks working in the background. I thank them all. I can't go through the names because we didn't give all the names to the ASL interpreters. I learned this today, but also because there's just a lot of people in the collective that are doing a lot of work, a lot of people in the communities in Ottawa. But we have heard from community members that what threatens our safety is, the current system we have in place, like the healthcare system that stigmatizes people who use drugs. The borders that are militarized and imaginary. They don't even exist, only in the figments of the imaginary of whiteness and white supremacy and border and which is enforced through border imperialism. CBSA makes us unsafe. Poverty, colonialism, police, patriarchy, children aid society, schools, and the school to prison pipeline. These are the things that make us unsafe. And in order to fight them, we can't fight each other. We have to fight the systems and their enforcers. That's my message. And I'm gonna take you folks through some closing notes. Please bear with me. I'm gonna tell you how to get involved in these things, how we can amplify, how to get involved with us in these things, how we can, what are the projects that are currently going, how you can stay in touch with us in the future. I'll play a slide for you in a second. My partners beside me who have been putting in a lot of work in the background is right here, and she put this slide for us. So please keep using the hashtag #WeKeepEachOtherSafe on social media currently and after the event happened. And follow CPEP group at CPEP group on our Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram in order to ask whatever you are on Turtle Island, or what is known as Canada, or what some others and a lot of people call KKK Canada. You can use our email zap tool that would send a message directly to the mayor and the councillor. If you follow the link cp-ep.org/defund the police, these two have been put together by folks from CPEP, but also folks from the Toronto Prisoners' Rights Project. And I invite you to follow them as well, Toronto Prisoners' Rights Project on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, and Let's Talk Jails on Twitter. Together we organized the Prisoner Emergency Support Fund. When it started, we started as a COVID-19 Prisoner Emergency Support Fund. Despite that the lockdown is being lifted on the outside, people on the inside are still experiencing very draconian measures that are torturing them in the name of public health. The carceral is clamping down on everyone because of COVID-19. There is no help for folks inside, whether financial or anything. This fund supports folks who are incarcerated, the one exiting the jail. You can go to the GoFundMe page. We received over 510 applications. We are processing a lot of them as we speak. Applicants to the fund, 48% are Black, 20% are Indigenous, First Nation, Métis, or Inuit. 32.2% are living with a disability. And please go donate to the fund. If you know folks who are incarcerated, who are exiting jails in Ontario, I forgot to mention this fund is for Ontario, please let them know and about the address of the fund. And I spoke to you earlier about the Defund the Police email zap tool. I invite you again to please go use it. The art that you see is by comrade Cyrus Marcus Ware, who is from Toronto, from Black Lives Matter Toronto, and organizes with Toronto Prisoners' Rights Project. Thank you for the art, it's amazing. And I invite you to subscribe to the newsletter, the CPEP newsletter that is starting. You can go to our website, cp-ep.org to sign up. It's right there in the beginning, thanks to Dave and folks who are working on the website. we are going to also organize a caravan on Colonial Day or Colonizer Day, July 1st. I invite you to come to it. This caravan means that a lot of cars and bicycles respecting social distancing are going to ride on unceded and unsurrendered Algonquin territory in downtown Ottawa, and will provide the participant with an opportunity to come together in solidarity with others engaged in struggle for decolonization, for defunding the police, defunding the prison, and prison abolition, and building communities will keep each other safe. I would like to highlight that in the midst of the movement to defund the police, the Ontario government just announced that they will increase the fund, or they will allocate $500 million to the institutions of human caging. The gentleman that was speaking to us today from inside and other people can testify that that money should go elsewhere. Keep following us, and we are going to engage in a campaign trying to stop the government from expanding human cages that just perpetuate colonialism and harm our communities, and instead invest that money to build communities, invest it in people. I would like to also, so just reiterating what I say, keep using the hashtag, we keep each other safe. And this is not the last event. This is not the first one that ever happened against police expansion. We will be holding several actions, even leading up to the police services board here on Algonquin territory, to resist them. But we are going to hold many other events that are going to demand the radical transformation, the fundamental restructuring of our communities, and for the police, the state, the prisons, the authoritarian regimes that are veiled by a so-called democracy to leave us alone, to let us organize ourselves in our communities and stop targeting us because of the color of our skin, stop targeting us because of who we are born to be, who we are socially constructed to be, because of gender that don't mean nothing in a physical sense, but that are socially constructed. Leave trans folks alone. Leave Black trans folks alone. Leave Indigenous Two-Spirit folks alone. So that's where our demands are going to be centered, and we are going to organize towards that. As we saw today, we need the community to come together. Despite our differences are good because we are different. In Morocco, where I come from, you say that's why we are created with separate heads, so everyone can do what they want. But thank you for tuning in. Keep the discussions going. Follow us on Instagram, at CPEP Group, Facebook, Twitter, and let's come together and let's dismantle the oppressive, abusive systems that trying to keep us under their boot. Thank you.